Hello and welcome to the White Deer Filmmaking Podcast. I'm Alistair Railton, sat here with my friend Adam Sandy, and we have Mark Wisdom in the background there on tech. So, Adam, who are we interviewing today?
We are interviewing Teddy Tenenbaum and Minsun Park, who co-wrote and Teddy directed the film Sidepiece.
And she acted in it.
And she also acted in it.
Yes.
And it won Best Comedy in our November-December season.
It did indeed. A very interesting take on modern dating life and the use of apps in dating. It was a very humorous piece, really, wasn't it? It was a good laugh.
Yep.
Good few laughs.
You would hope so, being Best Comedy, but
Well, yes, yeah, true.
it really was good though.
Yeah.
It made me laugh all the way through, and it stood out. I think the quality of it. I guess also the quality of the writing as well was really high in it. That contributed to it just overall feeling like a really good film. And also, and it was a great chat we had with them today as well. Really informative.
Gave us so much insight into the current state of Hollywood and the future of filmmaking, and how it's different between genres. How comedy and horror potentially doing quite well as genres in this modern age. So yeah, well, we can't wait for you to hear it. Of course, make sure you stick around to the end to hear our code of the week. We'll give you a discount to all submissions via Film Freeway. Anything else?
I think let's get into it.
Let's go for it. Okay, hope you enjoy.
Thanks for joining us. Can you give us a bit of an introduction as to who you are and a bit of a short synopsis about your film, please?
Sure. Minsun, you want to introduce yourself first?
Yeah. I am the better half of the writing team. My name is Minsun.
I'm supposed to say you're the better half. You're not supposed to say you're the better half.
Well, I saved you the trouble. Right. My name is Minsun Park, and I'm a screenwriter, and we generally write horror, so this is a bit of a departure for us, that nobody's head exploded or nobody died in a gruesome fashion. So
you can still add some After Effects.
That is true. That is true.
I'm Teddy Tenenbaum, co-writer. We're a writing team most of the time, although not all the time.
We're married. We forgot to say that.
And we're married. Yes, right. And I'm also the director of Sidepiece, the short film. It is a romantic comedy, and the setup is that two people have met on a unique dating app that we don't know much about when the story opens. They're meeting for the very first time in a park, and we soon discover that there's something particular about this dating app that causes trouble between them, and that what seems to be happening is not happening, and each of their stories are kind of hidden and unspool over the course of the feature, causing all kinds of problems in the romantic comedy world.
In short, it's a cute meet that is not so cute
after
all. So.
Yeah.
So what was the kind of inspiration behind creating this film? Is it?
Oh boy. When you're a screenwriter, you spend a lot of time in internet rabbit holes. And I guess I went down a particular click hole about modern dating. I don't know how it happened. I mean, I've been married for so long. It wasn't for like any sort of personal research. It was just an interesting story about, the dating in the age of apps, right? How it's just become this like swiping culture and everybody's so disposable. So I was reading, and then one click led to another, and then I read about this that there's single people who actually go on these like married cheating websites like Ashley Madison. I don't know if you guys have that in the UK, but
we've heard it in the news.
Yeah, and there was like that.
Sure. In the news. Right.
There was like a recent like data breach or something like that, so it was in the news. And then I think one story led to another about how there's some really emotionally unavailable single types who actually use that as a dating app because you can't I mean, you really can't get involved with somebody who's married, right? But if you want to have easy, convenient sex without the strings of a relationship, people will do that. And so I had an idea of how funny would it be if usually men lie about, being single when they're actually secretly married. But what if the tables were turned and there was a situation where a man or a woman pretended to be married when they were actually single, so that they could actually have an affair with someone else who was married. So that was like a premise that started brewing, and I told Teddy that, and he goes, "That is so sick, it's great."
And it's something that we originally talked about writing as a feature-length script. And so when we were basically practicing filmmaking, which is what I'm doing as a director at the moment, we just decided to take a shot and do what could be considered a proof of concept, although it's so different than our feature version that I don't think it really is. It was just a way for us to play with the idea, play it out. There's still the possibility that we would turn this into a feature idea at some point.
Yeah, I think that's that's what short films are for, aren't they? To experiment with and test out ideas and stuff. And but did you say it's not your common area to write comedy then? So have you done anything comedy before?
There's always some comedy in what we do.
Okay.
And we together as a team, we focus on horror. Separately, Minsun has done a lot of humor writing for magazine pieces, online, paid blogging, things like that. And so they were almost all humor based. In my work, I had mostly done horror, thriller, science fiction. I did write one comedy sitcom for a network, but there's always comedy as interwoven into the horror as a release from the tension.
Yeah.
Sometimes more obviously, where we've done comedy horror, which is really just truly a bending or mixing of the genre, and then oftentimes when we do very straight serious horror, there's just the characters bring out the humor in the story. So, and we're going back to horror next.
Although I think dating sounds pretty horrifying, so
yeah.
it seems to fit our wheelhouse.
And what's more horrifying than love and relationships?
Yeah.
I think we found it really funny, and also one of those kind of things where you watch it and kind of you smile at the general humour of it all the way through, between the kind of the laughs that come through. So I think, as a concept, it's funny. Like acting wise, it was funny. Just the whole piece, I think, just captured the comedy in a really nice way for us, and in a really professional way as well. It didn't seem like amateur or anything. It seemed like it could go on to be a feature or something like that. So
we only had one amateur actor in it, and that's her. And our other two actors, Janess, who's the female lead, has done a comedy pilot before, and she came in and auditioned and blew us away. She was just phenomenal. Like every facial gesture, every word was perfectly chosen. And our lead actor has done tons and tons of drama. He has an Emmy nomination for his daytime television work. He's a brilliant actor. We didn't know what his comedy chops were, but we didn't ask him to audition. We just hired him because we know he's such a fantastic actor. And he, the first day of rehearsals, we were just blown away at his
talent and his professionalism and his work ethic. He was just.
And his comedy.
He was way overqualified for our little film.
Yeah. And he's just a natural comedian, and we just didn't even know it and putting the two of them together and them coming up with their own ideas, it was just magic on the set for them.
So definitely chemistry happened.
Yeah. So did you, so you had rehearsals, like how much pre-production was there in the film? How much time did you spend on that?
Very little. So I don't think I mentioned said Michael's name, but Michael Money is our lead actor, and we got him the day before we started rehearsing. Again, we were so lucky to get Michael. But this was actually done for a project in a film class, and we had 2 weeks from assignment to completion. Okay. We wrote the script over the course of a week. It didn't take a week to write, but back and forth.
But the actual rough draft we did like over the kitchen table. Like,
yeah.
We just
yeah, it was pretty quick.
But, well, the kids were doing their homework or whatever.
Right. And then we knew we had the location. We had to shoot on the location on a certain day. It was at UCLA Botanical Gardens, and we. That took a while to work out, a few days to get them to agree to it. And then we knew we had 8 hours to do it. They opened the gates at a certain time. They closed the gates after that at 8 hours later. And we didn't have our crew either. So we had to crew up the whole thing in basically like 4 or 5 days. And then we had 1 day to shoot. So
we had auditions.
That's right. The auditions took 2 or 3 days.
And the guy that we first wanted to cast as the lead, I got another job
before we knew Michael. So
then we put out a call on Facebook looking for auditions. We were so desperate. And then it turned out that...
the truth is we wanted Michael, and we knew we had mutual Facebook friends. So we hoped that they would see it, and because we felt weird asking him because he's such a... he's a pro. We weren't going to pay much for this. Luckily, the word got to him.
Yeah, well, I'm friends with his wife, Jamie, on Facebook, and our kids went to the same school. So, luckily she slid into my DM, and it all worked out.
But it was a whirlwind. Like, I don't ever want to do it that way again. It was way too little time. It was crazy. And we were being kicked out of the park when they were closing too. We had like 3 shots left, and so the AD went around, tried to convince the guy to let us. Oh, we're actually unpacking, or we're bringing everything back, and we're still shooting in the background. And so we got an extra half hour out of it. It was nuts.
Yeah. So, I'd be very interested to know, actually, guys. What do you feel are the sort of fundamental differences between, say, writing and directing a thriller and a horror, which is like normally where you guys are around, and comedy, writing comedy and directing comedy? What do you feel were the main differences about taking on a comedy?
Oh boy, it's interesting because I feel personally that I think horror is very, very difficult. I think it's devilishly hard. I think Roald Dahl once said that was like the hardest genre of writing, and I agree. It's part of it's because everything's been done and seen before, so the shock value and factor it gets old really quickly. So you're always having to reinvent and come up with new scares. And I think with comedy, there's just it. Maybe because it was a departure for us, it just felt refreshing and it just came easier. We weren't sitting around going, "Oh no, that's not how people die. We should, he totally should have his head chopped off this way," or we don't get into these arguments about the best way to kill somebody.
In public, in cafes and Starbucks, and we get people kind of moving to tables further away from us.
Yeah, I'm surprised we haven't been arrested yet, because these disagreements can get kind of heated, and. But with the romantic comedy, I felt it was a lot. I don't know. It just felt easier, don't you think?
For me, I feel like breaking the story for horror is much harder than breaking a comedy story, because with comedy, it's just about human relationships, and the story itself is mostly about confusion and mistakes and people saying the wrong thing, or misunderstandings, acting one way when you really feel another way. So that's kind of such a part of our regular everyday lives that coming up with a story isn't necessarily as hard as horror, where you have to create a whole new world, rules, supernatural rules usually, and that can be far more complicated. It has to be far more believable. Comedy doesn't have to necessarily be believable in terms of the story. It's the humans, the characters, that have to be believable. But when you get to the writing stage, it feels like comedy is a lot harder, because obviously getting laughs is incredibly difficult, whereas scaring people feels a little bit easier. At least once you have the scenario, it's very much kind of a standard practice as to how to play a suspense scene. Once you know what's going to happen, writing it doesn't feel as hard as coming up with the jokes.
It's true. The jokes are hard, but scares are hard too. So being funny and being scary, they're both identical.
Yeah, I think it's remarkably similar. I think that the visceral reaction that people get from a joke when they laugh out loud, they can't control their mirth, is not dissimilar from the visceral reaction when people scream. There have been, I think that it's Jane Goodall showed that chimpanzees often their smile is actually a sign of aggression. It's meant to scare others off, and that's where human smiles may have come from. So I actually think that these are incredibly deep emotional reactions, and that come out of surprise, both for fear and for horror and for comedy. So I think that they're remarkably similar, and they both give release to your audience. When it comes to directing it, however, it feels like it's a lot different. And we're about to start another short film, one that we're going to spend a lot of time and a lot of money on as compared to the first one, that is very much a proof of concept. And I'm going to be directing that. Blocking out the comedy direction, it felt like, aside from just giving the actors room to play and have fun and be themselves and get the laughs out that way, we tried to come up with shots that were comic themselves, even though there's not too much of that because we didn't have a lot of time and we didn't have a lot of time to set up shots. But when it comes to the horror shots that we're setting up, a lot of them, I didn't care about how pretty the shots were in the comedy. I would have liked to, but I didn't really have time. And anyway, I really want to give the actors room to move. But for the horror, we're really working out how beautiful each shot should be. It's more like a Scorsese approach versus a Woody Allen approach, I would think. So I think they're vastly different when it comes to the directing.
But the pacing is similar. I mean, with a joke, it's like set up tension,
right,
and then deliver and release. And then same thing with, a horror scene. It's like set up tension, release. So whether you're laughing or screaming or crying, it's all like a release of tension.
Yeah, I've heard as well that horror and comedy are quite similar in terms of timing, that it's all kind of based on the timing of a joke or the timing of a scare kind of thing. So I guess that might be a similarity.
Yeah, which will come down to, I think, the editing. I know our first cut, there were a lot of opportunities we missed in terms of how to pace the humor and how to edit that. And I edited this myself. I'm not going to be editing the horror. We have a very experienced editor who's going to be doing that. But I think that the editing is incredibly crucial in both of those.
So so is directing a route that you're wanting to push forward with more and trying to do more of in the future then?
Yeah, I mean, it's the oldest Hollywood saw that what I really want to do is direct, and that's how I got into writing years ago. Was I figured I would write some scripts and then hopefully have the opportunity to direct. But then it just the writing lifestyle is a lot easier, or there's more time afforded to you and personal. You can stop whenever you want. And take care of your kids, enjoy life. With directing, when you're directing a feature or directing television, those days are insane for weeks on end, and you have no time. So I worked on a number of television shows, and when it was my episode that I had written, I would be on set all day with the director, and I was watching the directors and thinking, that job sucks compared to writing. And I'm just sitting there watching it, enjoying it, and that's where they're making all their decisions, and that's the hard work. And I think I just kind of floated away from it. But Hollywood has become a pretty strange place. Over the last 15 years, things have really changed. There was a time when it seemed like a good way to direct was to write scripts and eventually say, well, I want to direct this one. Now it's backwards. Now a good way to write, to get your written movie made, is to say, well, I'm a director, so I'll be the one to direct, because they're always looking. It's hard to find directors. It's incredibly difficult to find directors. And people often don't buy a script because there's no director attached, no one with a vision. So we decided to kind of switch gears, and we have a couple of scripts that are out to directors. We have scripts that directors have been attached to that have kind of fallen through at one point or other. And so we decided that it might be easier to sell our next script if it's something that we come on board as a director, which I always thought was the craziest thing. No one wants a first-time director. You want someone who you know is going to hit it out of the park. But actually, things are starting to change, and short films is a great way into that, because if you can prove in the short film, obviously, that you have talent as a director, and that film shows a concept that seems marketable to a financier then, or a studio, then it seems like oftentimes the best way, especially now, this has been happening a lot in the last few years, the best way to get your story told is make a short film proof of concept of it and see if you can sell it that way. So that's what we're embarking on.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Would you say that you're working in kind of the Hollywood system, or working just outside of the Hollywood system, maybe, like just because you get kind of progressing up the ranks kind of thing, but I guess if you're trying to make a short, then maybe you can kind of get in somewhere up the ranks slightly, maybe. How do you feel about that?
I mean, I've always worked within the Hollywood system from the very start. I never got to do independent films. I started working as assistants on major studio productions, both television and features, right from the start. That's how I started. I've never had managers or agents who work within the indie system. So, and I've always been interested in it. I mean, as another option. But I've always gone through. I have studio meetings. I get assignments. I've written so many sequels and remakes because that's all the studios want to do. I feel like I don't know enough about independent financing, and I'm starting to learn more and more about it. But I think our first shot is probably, we're going to try to do it in two ways. One, we'll have our agents go through the normal process of sending this short that we're going to finish out to studios, and then probably pitching the feature version of it in meetings with them. But I know that a ton of horror movies are being made and independently financed these days, and having a short out on the festival circuit and hopefully having some success with it is a way to get seen by financiers that way as well. So I think we're probably going to be doing that two-pronged approach simultaneously.
I think we kind of went about it backwards. Most people are trying to break in, right? And then they create a short film or whatever. I think it's funny because we've been professional writers. We have agent managers. We've made a living doing this. And then I think because of the way Hollywood has changed so much, that we've decided that we wanted to create some more autonomy and control over our product. And honestly, everything that's in theaters is just like sequels or, remakes or books that they've, acquired. Nothing really original anymore, right? So we just kind of got burnt out with like going up for the same job that everybody's going up for. And we wanted to actually see something that we had a vision for on camera. Just wanted to see it. It would be refreshing for a change instead of we've been through the development hell process, and we just wanted to take control and do something that we had total control of from beginning to end. And it was just really gratifying,
Except for the part where we're using our own money.
That part's not so gratifying. We like getting paid. Yeah. I mean, exposure doesn't pay the rent, but, at the end of the day, we're also creatives, and it was just nice to be creative, and have no other agenda except just to, enjoy the whole reason we were doing this in the first place, Right.
I think that's a really common thing for people to feel, even if maybe they're doing kind of like corporate filmmaking and stuff like that. You can get burnt out doing that side of it, and then kind of the release of being able to do something that doesn't have an agenda is really big. And we often see people either making stuff within kind of a studio system or taking the complete independent route and financing stuff themselves. And occasionally there's a bit of a crossover if they've managed to get some kind of funding from somewhere. But I'd say in our experience of talking to people on this podcast, it's kind of few and far between where it's been a funded project. It's either been their own money or maybe crowdfunding or something like that. But it is.
The themes are generally the same, aren't they? It's people enjoying having that like you guys were saying, the creative autonomy over projects. I mean, what I'd be very interested to know, because obviously it works slightly differently in the UK than it does in the US. I mean, do you think that is the future for Hollywood? That it is going to break apart and it will become a series of independent filmmakers and smaller production companies producing original content? I mean, could it?
Or is it just going to be Disney from now on?
Yeah, number two. Yeah, I don't think. I mean, obviously the industry's experiencing all kinds of turmoil right now, mainly because of the streamers, which have not been bad for creatives. When it was just Netflix, it didn't have that much of an impact. But now that it's Disney Plus and Hulu is spending more money, and Apple and Amazon are all in the game, the need for content has exploded. Mostly in television, or at least mostly in series, but also in feature films, and where it's strange for filmmakers, I think, to not get to experience the event-like feeling you get when your film comes out in the theaters, or when your show broadcasts on every television in the United States at the same time. At least you are getting things made, and people are getting paid to do that. And I don't think that, independents continue to struggle. Independent financing continues to struggle. You'll have a few companies like Neon and A24, which, seem to be doing the best, and everybody else, comes and goes out of business. And even mini studios, they'll pop up and they'll seem to be doing great for 5 or 10 years, and then they have a couple of flops and that they're gone. So I would be surprised to see independent become incredibly successful, except as a feeder to streamers. And I think that's going to happen more and more. But I don't think, that the streamers kind of want to do it two ways. And I know that Netflix likes to buy things that are already made, because then they don't have to put the production money in and they can get it cheaper. But at the same time, they also know that they have to constantly create content, because they're kind of trying to create subscriptions. They just need more and more subscriptions. That's their model. So I don't think things are going to go the independent route just because it costs people more money, and it's more of a risk for individuals. But I really hope that there's more and more success on the independent. I mean, I think horror has helped that a lot. A lot of companies like A24 is a good example. I think maybe Neon's a good example too, where they seem to be very successful in mixing kind of independent fare with low budget horror. Elevated low budget horror. And it's a good way for them to minimize their risk a little bit, because they know that they're going to sell more tickets with horror than they are probably with independent. So I'd love to see that continue. And Minsun and I really like, and it's getting to be kind of a cliched phrase, but we don't want to write horror unless it's elevated, unless there's something really behind it, something that's an analogy to modern society or cultural issues, things that people are going through. And Get Out helped relaunch that, and I think that that's what people really want, which is great, because that's what we want to write. But there will always be a place for just plain old scary horror too. Kind of me.
I think I've heard that horror as a first-time filmmaker, first-time director kind of route is one of the cheaper genres to kind of create, which I guess is part of the reason for what you're talking about, of that it's becoming a route in for directors, just because it's a bit cheaper to make. And I guess comedy also kind of fits into that bracket as well. You can create comedy fairly cheaply, I'd say. It's the kind of big budget sci-fi, big action kind of things that are the harder ones to create now. I think that might be maybe not as represented in that entry level first time director area, but I think it's good. Well, it's great if that's what you want to do, and it also lines up with being a fairly reasonable route to hopefully getting in and directing stuff, and as you build up the trust, I guess you will be able to get those opportunities and write and direct what you want to do, really. So that sounds great, really. but it is. I guess we don't have as much of that kind of experience with what we do, being quite indie filmmaking, kind of having that relationship with the studio and being at that level where we're taking stuff to studios and stuff. So it's really interesting to hear kind of like your perspectives on that, and I think most of the people that we've interviewed haven't had that perspective as well, so I think it'll be really interesting for people to hear about that and your experiences.
I would say though that one of the things I think is great about making short films is that you get an opening to studios that equalizes you with everybody else. So we don't have any advantage over, you know, a filmmaker from Brazil, a filmmaker from the UK, a student filmmaker, that to getting our films seen. We don't have any advantage over them to getting studio executives to watch their film. Once you get into the film circuit, the film festival circuit rather, it equalizes. The playing field is completely leveled, so that any filmmaker from anywhere who makes something of quality and gets into some festivals can be seen at the same level and the same interest level as someone who's worked in the Hollywood system for years. I think the only place that there's a hierarchy in that is in the film festivals themselves, and I don't think there's a ton of it. I mean, there's, you know, this level and everybody else. If you're and there's only 3 or 4 places on, you know, up here. If you get into Cannes or Sundance or Slam Dance, every executive is going to be watching everything that comes out of that. And it's, you know, I heard a story the other day, which is a ridiculous story, but someone was told by a filmmaker was told by their agent when they didn't get into Sundance, "Oh, your career's over," which is insane. You know, one festival it can make you, but it certainly isn't going to break you by not being in it. And I would fire that agent, you know, as soon as they said that. But once you get into there's so many amazing festivals like yours and new festivals starting, you know, working their way up as well. And if you can make a good showing in a few festivals, the executives are watching those. They're looking to see who the winners are, and they're watching those on their own. So kind of that being discovered, that old Hollywood story of being discovered in a drugstore, you know, the actress. That in a way, film festivals are a way to make that happen in modern times.
Well, I think that's reassuring for us as well, being kind of making short films, and yeah, that sounds good, and I'm sure that'll reassure a lot of other people as well. So, thanks for that.
Sure. I mean, the one caveat to that is that genre still matters. That it's harder to break out with a beautiful little drama than it is with a hilarious comedy or a scary horror film, because in the end, studios still want something they can sell, and they are much more likely to see a genre piece that is a clearly marketable, broad audience, you know, 4-quadrant movie out of a piece of film that's a genre than they are from a great little drama. So and I see a ton of filmmakers who are great drama filmmakers making horror or comedy. I think partly because of that, but I also think partly because they have a secret love of the genre that has been, you know, that a lot of people have been embarrassed to admit for many years. And I don't think you have to be embarrassed to admit it anymore. I think that there's a lot of art in genre filmmaking.
Right, horror suddenly become, well, I don't know if it'll ever be highbrow, but I think Jordan Peele has helped elevate the genre to something more respectable.
Yeah. Ari Aster as well.
Right. So that part is great, actually. But yeah, I mean, there's no shame in my game. I mean, I love horror and I love all of it, but you know, people still see it as kind of the, what do you call it? A lesser
stepchild.
Yeah. It doesn't have it. It's like no one's gonna ever win an Oscar for horror. You never know.
Well, and The Silence of the Lambs in 92. I can't
That's
remember.
kind of a hybrid, though.
Yeah, and it's but I think it's going to become a more and more commonplace. You know, Jordan Peele won for Best Screenplay. So, and then of course some people would say that Parasite's a horror movie. I wouldn't exactly qualify it that way, but there was a lot of talk about that, and
For sure, it
One
has
Best
horror
Picture this year.
elements, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. So I think we're at the dawn of great horror.
Yeah, I think so, and we're also seeing that just in our festival alone as well. We've spoken to a couple of horror directors as well, and doing, I guess, trying to do something their own way in the same way that Jordan Peele is as well, and so that it's kind of interesting seeing how people are trying to put their own stamp on the genre as it's growing a bit, and we really like that ourselves, to see something a bit different with horrors especially, and with any film really, just something that stands out, isn't it? And that's what the executives, I guess, are looking for as well, albeit something that is gonna make them some money as well, obviously, but that's always gonna be the case.
Yeah, I mean, there are two different things that people are looking for. I mean, a lot of directors will get signed to agencies and managers because they're just quality. You know, you can just see how great they are, and they have a great voice. But then there's the secondary, well, I don't know if it's secondary, but the other consideration, which is, do they see a movie in it? And, you know, we see a lot of concept, proof of concept films, short films, where you can see how this would play out over 10 minutes, but you can't see how this would play out over 120 minutes. And I think that's kind of the key to making a short proof of concept film, is the viewer has to be really clear about what the movie would be if this were a feature-length film, and they have to want more, obviously.
Yeah. Well, guys, we're just very aware of the time, so we've just got two very small couple of questions left, if that's all right. So we like to ask everyone this. In both of your experiences, what wisdom can you pass on or advice to any aspiring writers, directors, or anybody looking to start their first film?
Oh, wow. Do you want to go, or should I go?
I would just say, do not rush the process like we did. Take your time, do a shot list. If you're the director, do a shot list. Draw some storyboards before you go. Show your shot list to as many people as you can, especially other people, other filmmakers, really only other filmmakers, and but particularly directors. And don't rush the shoot either. And also add whatever time you think it's going to take to shoot. Add 30%, because it's always going to take 30% more.
I think my advice would be geared towards writers. Especially with, all the self-doubt and the personal demons that you battle every time you sit in front of a computer. I think that one of the best writing tips I ever got from another writer friend was just, if you get intimidated with the writing process, just give yourself permission to just sit down for like 10 minutes. Like, you can set a timer, and all you have to do is sit down for 10 minutes and just start. It doesn't have to be good. You don't even have to write a word, but just set that time for yourself. And then when I do that, I've discovered that after 10 minutes, I'm generally willing to sit for longer. And then longer, and then longer. And then over time, it just becomes this habit. So for me, it's like with working out or with doing anything in life, how you feel, your motivation is not important. You got a job to do, you just do it. Don't overthink it. You're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. But your feelings are overrated. If you don't feel like writing, or if you don't feel like doing anything, too bad. Suck it up, do it anyways. I mean, I know you're creative, and you're like, oh, but I'm not inspired. That's not important. It's like a muscle. You just got to work it. And some days it's just going to be easier than others.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like tricking your brain into starting, and then it kind of carries on once you have got started. And also lastly, kind of what's both of your kind of like aims and future ambitions? What's your kind of like North Star at the moment? What are you heading for in the next kind of maybe 5 years, something like that?
Well, I mean, we've got this short film we want to get up in a couple of months, so we're going to probably start funding for that. And this is very much a proof of concept, and we hope to sell it as a feature film. I want to direct it. Then, if we have any luck with that, or even if we can set it up even without before we get a chance to shoot it. We wrote a script a couple years ago that we optioned to Sony. That's now back. We own the rights to it again, and I think we'd love to get back to that, and another horror film, and I'd love to direct that. We wrote another thing that we're out to directors on. That's kind of a Western horror film, or prairie horror film. Takes place in the Western prairies of the United States in the 19th century, and we're out to directors on that. We've got some interest, but I think it'd be fun if we did that instead and took it back ourselves and potentially did that. But I think it's going to be. I think we'd like to spend the next 5 years doing a combination of potentially directing things and just writing things that we're happy to have someone else take the reins on. But probably horror, and I think we'll go back to a little comedy and romantic comedy as well. So.
Yeah, I think we're on the course that we want to stick on for the next 5 years. We'll see, but I've also learned that you never know what's going to happen. We're just trying to be in the moment, enjoy every moment as it comes along, and right now there's this thing going on with the Writers Guild, and I don't know if you guys know about it in the news, but we've all had to fire our agents over Teddy can describe it better. I can't describe it. It's been going on for a while, so
yeah, it's better to just Google it.
Yeah, just Google it.
Writers Guild fights with agents.
Yeah. So that's a dispute that's been going on. So things have been in limbo for a long time. So. And
we're about to the Writers Guild's about to head into, as is the Directors Guild. It's every 3 years. Is there a name for every 3 years? Like triannual? That would be 3 times a year. I don't know what it is. The contract negotiations for the main contract that the Writers Guild Union works under with the studios, and there's talk of a potential strike, which I don't think is going to happen. But that just leading up to it always causes a lot of turmoil. So the next few months are probably all up in the air anyway, which is a great time to make short film.
Uh-huh. Maybe a short film about coronavirus. I don't know.
Keep it topical.
Yeah.
Keep it topical, yeah.
Right.
So, well, that's great. Is there anywhere where people can follow you on social media, websites, anything like that, if they want to keep up to date with what you're doing?
Yeah, we have our individual various social media feeds. Minsun is, what's your Instagram again?
Oh, yeah, it's at Minsun10, so MINSUN number 10.
And then, and my personal Instagram is Teddy Tenenbaum. Actually, TEDDYTBAUM. Teddy Tenenbaum. But Sidepiece has Twitter and Instagram. On Twitter, it's Sidepiece M for movie. It just got cut off, and it was too late to fix it. Our Instagram is Sidepiece Movie. Our Facebook is Sidepiece Movie for that. And then we'll probably be using that to help launch our horror film, short film as well. So,
excellent. Well, thanks very much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's great being here.
Us.
Cheers. Well, thanks for listening and watching. I thought that was a really interesting episode.
Absolutely.
Personally.
Yeah.
I think people will get a lot from it. Mark has 2 thumbs up.
It's all for Michael Money.
Mark likes the lead actor in it. I'm not disagreeing with you.
Because I'm glad that they saw in him what I do. I just think he's really good.
Yeah, but I think he's a funny guy.
Yeah.
And obviously, as they said in it, that they realised how funny he was on set, kind of thing.
Yeah.
It must have been great to see that actually happening in person, because it was great to watch.
And they're not wrong. The chemistry.
Comedy.
It's like comedy chemistry.
It was really, really strong, and that takes both actors to bring that. So it's not all about Michael. So it is an ensemble piece, and you can tell that everyone on set was there to do a good job.
Yeah.
Just everyone involved really doing good work, I think.
Yeah.
It
was great.
Very well done.
So yeah.
Genesia.
Good film. Definitely one worth watching. That was Sidepiece, which won Best Comedy at our November-December season.
And I would recommend following them on social media, like they said, to get updates on
lots of
their new
exciting
film.
projects coming up. From horror to comedy. It's a good range that they direct together. So yeah,
I would like to see one of their horrors. I think
that would be good.
coming from us having just seen their comedy.
Yeah.
I think it would be very interesting to see what they
a
do
nice
with horror.
contrast, wouldn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
So, should we do a code?
Oh, let's go for it.
Mark wants us to get on with it. I think he's
Alright.
got somewhere to be.
Yeah.
Let's. I'll tell you, and you can write it down on your touchscreen device if you have one,
Or on your paper
or on your paper. Use a pen.
or pencil.
Yep. WDPODTT396. That's WDPODTT396.
Brilliant.
And that's 10% off for the duration of the week.
Yep. As
yeah.
always, make sure you follow us on all social media channels, and if you want to be part of this filmmaking experience, make sure you submit your films to the White Deer International Film Festival, which can be found on Film Freeway.
Film Freeway.
That's the one.
That was a good one, Mark, wasn't it?
What? A good ending?
Yeah. Solid, professional.
Solid, smooth.
Well, you've and you should have ended.
Right,
strong.
we should have ended
We should have-
then.
maybe
We
should
should have ended.
We cut.
Okay.
Okay.
We've ruined a good ending.
Do it all again.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. Take it easy.